probably make a difference. Good morning. What I just got to finish saying is today we are going to do just a little bit different. Kara Miller, sorry, Kara. She is going to be leading us through the agenda today. Kara is currently serving as the president-elect on our board, and so she will be taking over the president-elect position in July. And so she will be leading us through the agenda today. We're going to follow a similar format. And then we have about 3 weeks in May where we thought we would do our meetings. We planned on wrapping up May 15th, Friday, May 15th, because I know different schools are getting out at different times. So the 22nd, I know a lot of people are already wrapping up or are finishing or have PD days. So we will have our last day be May 15th, and we will just plan on continuing to meet 9 o'clock on Fridays until that day. So Kara, are you back with us?
I am. Sorry, I was chasing a naughty toddler real quick.
That's all right. I was muted for the first 2 minutes and didn't realize it. So.
Well, now I have a mess to clean up. She decided to dump all of the dog's food into the water bowl, so that'll be fun later. So life of working at home, right? Like the differences of one moment to the next is just a different type of chaos, I think. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and kind of take point today a little bit. I think we're just trying to make sure that you know who the different board members are. So if you want to reach out to us, or if we have, you know, maybe a different area that we can help you in or something like that because you heard something that we said on here. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you'll get a little chance to hear from each of us and kind of know a little bit more. I've obviously spoken up quite a bit in these meetings. And if you didn't catch on, I'm up here in Powell. I work at the high school as a counselor, and I have a co-counselor, so there's 2 of us working, and then next year we'll have another additional counselor joining us part-time. So that's kind of the role that I'm in at the high school level right now. And I'm just kind of new to the board. This last year was a first for me, and I feel like I'm growing a lot professionally, but I have a lot still to learn from others. So hopefully I get a chance to do that before I get to step in as that president role. All right, so just to look at our agenda, we've got the resource page that we've been adding onto, you know, weekly. It's right there. Is there anything else that we would need to add? We are kind of going back and adding it at the end of each of these so that it's the most up to date for you guys. So as it's, you know, as you're looking, just kind of keep popping back in. If you've missed a week, go check out some of the new resources. But if you, as always, if you have something that you thought was helpful to add, just add it into the chat box. Between Amy, myself, and the rest of the board, we're going to get it on there for you. One thing that did happen this week is ASCA did come out with their virtual high school counseling toolkit. I checked it out earlier in this week, and there's just a lot of good resources specific to high school counseling, post-secondary transitions, grading even, which I know has been a very hot topic in my world right now of how we're going forward with the next little bit to help ensure that students have all the same opportunities, but we're also being realistic of the challenges they're going through right now. Like Amy said, we're gonna wrap up our Zoom meetings on the 15th. I know that I think that next weekend or that next Friday is part of a holiday weekend as well. So just a lot of things we weren't sure what would be happening in your guys' world. I know that we had a short conversation last time about, hey, this has been really helpful. I know I'm growing and learning from people around the state, and as we are one of the smallest states as far as counseling populations, it's really important that we're connecting, and I really value this time. So I'm hoping that we can continue this in the fall, but we want to look at a realistic timeline for that. How often is enough, but not overwhelming? And so I think that we'll, as a board, send out a short survey. We love those responses. It's helpful for us to know not only how often you want to meet, but also you know, what are good times? And that's hard to accommodate everyone, but we want to try to be as flexible as we can to make sure we get all of you to be able to join and participate in that. So anything else from the first three? Oh, go ahead.
Hi, sorry to interrupt you, Kara. I just wanted to add a little bit on virtual high school counseling. Who doesn't know me, I'm from Sheridan College, and we are also doing virtual high school visits via Zoom. So if anyone is interested, if you have any students that have questions that go to Sheridan College, we can arrange a Zoom meeting together with you and your students. Just wanted to let you know.
That's awesome. Thank you. I know that I've been reached out to by a couple of the different community colleges saying, hey, this is how we're going to do that. Here's the link. I've really just at the high school level been, I just met with all my seniors yesterday for our senior info day, and we just talked about at this point, truly, it's probably more helpful for our seniors to go directly to the college admissions and say, what's your process? How can I make sure that I've got all my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and how are you helping me get registered for classes, and you know, what is your orientation going to look like, and those sort of pieces. And so not that I don't like to be a middleman, I think it's just been really empowering too for our students to kind of feel confident saying, I'm going to email the admissions directly and you guys are there and available. And
yeah,
so
that what I meant is we arrange a meeting, a Zoom meeting with the students, and you can be there if you want or not. And we together answer all of their questions in like a conversation, kind of like a, you know, group setting. So
perfect.
like directly we answer their questions. So
awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I keep stopping and just kind of being in awe of how well, or the adaptability of the human population is just astounding to me right now. And the community colleges and the colleges in Wyoming have really stepped up to that as well. So we really appreciate that partnership. And I'm never stopping to say, whoa, look what we can do, even if we didn't have a lot of tools beforehand. So I get kind of mushy about that stuff. All right, the other thing that we wanted to do is Natrona County has Sherry Wester. Are you on here, Sherry? Open.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it over to you because, to be honest, I don't have a ton of information. I think you talked mostly with Amy on this, but we love that you wanted to come and help us out and share with us. So I'm going to let you kind of run the next little section if that's okay by you.
Thank you.
Do you need me to stop sharing my screen? Do you have things that you would like to share?
Nope, we're good. This is just pretty much conversation. Thank you. So I loved it that our board sent out a survey asking about like topics that we might want to discuss. This is really a wonderful opportunity. I think a lot of us find a difficult time to collaborate within our district, let alone across state. And so I thought we could take advantage of this. And my suggestion was to talk about things other than just COVID. I mean, that's our primary thing that has brought us all together in this format weekly. And I think it'd be great to talk about topics outside. So I wrote a couple things in there, and one of them is kind of the trend in our school district to make a dual role in the schools for mental health professionals. And that made me just kind of stop and think about the school counselor role in general. You know, the history of it. It's been around for a long time, you know, like over 100 years, there have been school counselors, and how it has changed from guidance counselors. Like at the very beginning, it really was that school to factory kind of thing brought on by the Industrial Revolution. And then when Sputnik took off, it was guidance into science and technology areas, and how it's just kind of continued to change over time. And then with some passages in federal legislation to fund school counseling, it really blossomed and took off into a profession of its own. In Wyoming, we're no longer required to have previously been a teacher before we're a school counselor. I think there's some states that have kind of hung on to that, and I'm hoping that they give that up pretty soon. We have our own education and training, and so we really are a profession separate from just education and teaching. I mean, that's still a component of it, but we are our own profession. And so then that led me into thinking about, so we're not guidance counselors anymore. Guidance is a part of what we do, but it's not it entirely. And that made me think about that idea of role ambiguity or role diffusion. And that really applies to kind of what's going on in our school district right now. Role ambiguity and role stress comes around when we're not really sure what we do. And research around school counselor roles has kind of come in 3 different areas. There's one section of research that have really asked administrators, what do school counselors do? So we have administrators defining school counseling as one thing. And then there's another group of research that's asked school counselors, what is it that you do? And then the third one is asking teachers, what do school counselors do? And so when we have all these different things defining what is a school counselor and what are the duties of a school counselor, I think it gets confusing. And I know personally in my world, I see that pretty much on a daily basis. You know, what do my administrators think I'm doing? What are they asking me to do? And then what do my teachers think? And then what do my colleagues? How do we define ourselves? And I know in our district, it can be very different school to school, what those school counselors do. So specifically, Natrona County School District has combined the school counselor role with the IEP related service provider role. And in our district, that's been school social workers. And that's just kind of historically how it's defined. There's school counseling and there's school social work. And school counselors deal with the general education population, and school social workers have dealt with the students on IEPs. Several years ago, we've got some counselors in our district at the elementary level that spent a lot of time and put a lot of work into advocating with our district to recognize the importance of school counselors and to try and get more school counselors into the elementary level. The district response to that was, okay, we can put more people in the elementary, and how we're going to do it is those people half-time, their job is going to be funded out of general education funds, and they're going to be called a school counselor. And the other half of their time, they're going to be funded out of special education funds, and they're the school social worker. So there's this dual role, school social worker and school counselor. With the adoption of ESSA and our district's move toward making sure that we're providing those multi-tiered systems of support that ESSA talks about, we're moving to a place where that dual role is being adopted at the secondary level. Right now, it's just one middle school, my middle school, that has adopted it. What I'm hearing from administrators and leaders in the district is that's going to expand to where all of our middle schools will be looking at it, and possibly up into the high schools. Our high schools are a little bit later at jumping on the bandwagon. So when I think about that, I wonder, what are the benefits to that model? And what are the possible negative effects of that model? So one thing that could potentially be a benefit is the consistency. And I think that's part of what our district looked at too at the elementary level, was having one person in the school that's providing the services to the student, rather than somebody having to work, you know, so many days at this school and then go over and so many days at this school. It's one person is in that building. And I think that probably does benefit the students. So they've got a familiar face and that one person to look at. I think the downside that kind of goes along with that is, you know, that ratio that ASCA recommends of the 1 to 250. Our district feels like they've met that ratio now because they've got one mental health professional in an elementary that's around 300 students. The problem is, in my mind, they haven't looked at it that, yeah, there's one person, but they're doing half of one job and half of another job. And so really they've got half of a school counselor in that building for that 300 students. So I'm not sure. And at the middle level, we already had a full-time counselor and a full-time social worker. So it didn't really change our ratio. where it was 1 to 830 or 840. We're still 1. It's just now half a person and half a person. So some other negative effects that I have thought of with the role ambiguity is, does this model fit with certification and licensure rules and regulations? So my background is actually not as a school counselor. I started out in community mental health. My degree is not school counseling. It is a counseling psychology degree. When I came into the district as a school counselor at that time, PTSB certification was still required. And so I was trying to seek certification by like meeting the requirements, excuse me. So I took school counseling classes through UW to make up for what my degree didn't have in that school counseling. And then all that changed and it didn't matter anyway. So when I think about my license as a licensed professional counselor, I think about Wyoming being a Practice Act and title protection state. And so simply put, that means you don't practice outside of your specialty and you don't use a title that you're not licensed for. So this year I've experienced some discomfort with the idea that I have a job title that is social worker, because I'm not a social worker. My degree is not in social work. My license is not in social work. And so that's kind of been uncomfortable with me. And I've been working with district around that discomfort. In the specialty area, I think me working with students that are on an IEP is not outside of my specialty. I think I can very much perform those duties. But what I'm doing is not social work. So when I go to an IEP meeting, I'm introduced as the social work, and what I'm doing is described as social work. And so, like I said, I've worked with district on that, and have been told that it's okay. You know, district doesn't want to put us in a position of being uncomfortable or feeling like our license is at risk. So I'm trying to correct and introduce myself as a counselor, and what I do is counseling. That the end result, you know, identifying what help the student needs and working to provide that help is the same. It's just coming at it from a different theoretical background. And so I think I'm, you know, we're moving forward that way. But it makes me wonder, as a school counselor, and knowing that one of our ethical responsibilities is to advocate for our position, I thought, okay, so what does that mean and what do we actually do for that? And one is, I think, defining who we are for the people that we work with. So when I do go into that IEP meeting, or I'm talking with case managers outside of the meeting and they're referring to me as social worker, I just very nicely correct them and say, yep, the work is kind of the same, but I'm a licensed professional counselor providing the services. I think also there's some really good guidance that ASCA has for advocating. And specifically, I read a newsletter article from Mindy Hall, who talked specifically about advocating for our profession using the ASCA resources that are out there. And so when I think about advocating for the profession, what I'm talking about is communicating to the people that I work with, so teachers, administrators, parents, students, what school counseling is and what it entails. Trying to make it a clearer role so that people understand what it is. ASCA's got position statements that we can use to help us advocate what our school counseling program is and what it looks like and the benefits that it provides to students. Looking at those appropriate and inappropriate duties, I don't know how many times I've printed those off and given them to various administrators in our district. Sometimes I get a comment on it. I think sometimes it's just largely, you know, put in their pile of something to read later. Mostly, I think about advocacy every day. And Mindy Hall talked about that as promoting the role in the school by being visible, introducing ourselves using school counselor terminology, using signage everywhere, making sure that we are identified as school counselor. I also think of that like, even in our emails, I think if we use our degree, whatever our degree is in, you know, put that alphabet soup after our names and do it appropriately so that people who have an awareness of what that is supposed to look like, they're also recognizing us as as professional equals. So if I have to communicate with somebody outside of the school district, how am I going to show that I do have the education and the degree that makes me a professional too? I think that when we're recognized that way, that helps to build our professional identity. A lot of times I see it done kind of backwards, and I think that that sends a poor message to those professionals, our community counterparts. So just a reminder that it's degree first, then your licensure, and then any other additional certifications that you might have. It's harder with PTSB certification because there's not those letters that we use, like there's nothing identified. And so then your degree, and then just under your name, I would put certified school counselor, state certified school counselor, just to show, yes, there is a level of proof that I've gotten this degree and I've done everything that it takes in order to fill this professional role. And then I also would recommend displaying your degrees and your licenses and certifications in your office. If you have multiple offices, make copies, hang up the copies. Doctors do it. And why do they do it? It helps to establish them as a qualified professional. It also helps the person that you're working with to build a comfort level and a trust that, yep, you are the professional that you say you are, and I can trust you to help me with whatever it is. So those are the things that I think about. And then I think about advocacy at the district and state level. I would love to see WDE adopt ASCA as our model. Don't know how to convince them of that, but I think that that would be a really good thing. It would also provide us with some consistent practices across the state and a consistent role. You know, that then if WDE says our school model, our school counseling model is the ASCA national model, then when we take those things to our administrators and say, hey, remember, ASCA is our model for school counseling, and ASCA says, I really shouldn't be spending my time coordinating assessments, or I really shouldn't be spending my time scheduling 504 meetings. You know, there's other people that can do that. So I think about those advocacy things.
So I'm gonna interrupt you. Just, I don't know if you're seeing the chat on the side.
No.
There's some great. No, you're fine. I just want to make sure that you're kind of aware of what's going on the other end. One of the questions that was thrown out is, you know, what's going on in your district with Wyoming being so rural and yet diverse at the same time, because Natrona is going to be a lot larger than our, you know, our bighorn counties or whatever it might be. How are we actually looking in the state of Wyoming for the roles within each school district for social work versus counselors? And there's some comments just that there is that dual role because of our peer population size, and that we are taking on different roles outside of maybe what even ASCA might say, as far as you know, taking on all of this counseling for both 504s, IEPs, and general education population, and those different things. So maybe if you're comfortable with it, maybe I would ask the group to kind of speak up about how it's looking in each of their district, or give an example of how they've had to work through those dual roles because either there's just not a social worker available, or maybe they're filling a school counseling position with a social work position, yet we're all considered that mental health. How are we working together or blending? are you okay if I open it up to others, or I don't want to cut you off either?
Nope, I think that would be great, because like I say, in our district, that dual role is being filled by school counselors, school social workers, licensed professional counselors, or licensed clinical social workers. And I know that yeah, that is a challenge in those rural areas. Yeah, we need people.
Perfect. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. And really, this is the value, I think, of getting together on a Zoom. Please feel free to pipe in, you know, and let us know your thoughts. I see the Zoom chat going on, but it's sometimes helpful to get a little more insight.
I just have another kind of follow-up question for you about that, Sherry. I'm curious, I'm just thinking in my building of all the other things I do, like I get kids a change of pants if they spill their milk, or I make sure that we get the free and reduced lunch applications filled out. We do our Mustang packs. Like I do, you know, we go to the court hearings and all that, which is very social worky stuff to me, kind of. And so I'm curious, why is it just the IEP counseling that they consider a social work thing, or are there other roles or duties that they consider like a social worker to do?
Yeah, our district is a district that we have not really had job descriptions. And so our roles really are defined simply by that job title. And it just historically has been gen ed and IEP split. And we probably, each in our roles, we have done those very things that you talk about for the student population that we kind of work with. I think the downside to having the roles split is that I think then it might promote some territorial feelings. So a social worker might think, oh, well, the IEP kids are mine, so the school counselor shouldn't work with them. But the school counselor knows that they're there for all students. And so then there might be some conflict. So the dual role, one thing that I've liked about it this year is it really does help us to share responsibility and to be more equal colleagues in the building. So that'd be a real positive, I would say. But yeah, there's no, like what we're doing isn't really defined as social work or counseling.
Hi, Sherry. This is April from Converse County. I really appreciate what you're saying about advocating for our role, because that's huge. And that's why ASCA developed the national model. And so it does give us that blueprint and that outline for what we're supposed to be, what we should be doing and what our role looks like and how our role impacts the school, regardless of what our title is. I know in our district, we have a K-1 social worker, and we have 2, 3, 4, 5, well, school counselors and the rest of as building counselors. And the K-1 counselor and me as a 4-5 counselor do essentially the same role. We see students on IEPs, we take care of the 504s, we do the classroom lessons. Our district also has specific special education counselors, which take care of the IEP goals primarily, and then it rolls over to the building counselors when there's a need for it, or their schedule won't allow for when that student can be seen, or whatever it is. But there's a collaboration piece that happens in our district with our entire mental health team. And I think that's vital to avoid that territorial fights over what my role is, what your role is. We need to work as a team because we're all on the same page. We're all here for the kids. We got into these positions not because of a title or an alphabet soup, because we have a passion for supporting students. And I think we need to make it about that and advocating for our roles. And yeah, we have different titles. And our school social worker at the primary proudly calls herself a school social worker because that's her training. I proudly call myself a school counselor because that's my training. But essentially, we do the same things. We collaborate together on what we're doing. And we have 2 schools in our state who have done the national model who have ramped. And I know Sharon's in here. And I don't know if anyone from South High is in here, but they've ramped as well. My schools are starting the process. We're in the very beginning part of it because that advocacy piece is so important to me. Because I want people to know what my role is, what I should be doing, what I bring to the table in supporting students. I'm not just the person who comes in and does a fun little lesson with puppets or whatever. But I'm also like, I bring something valid to the table. I have training that's worthwhile. And I think that's a huge piece of it. And I know as a board in WISCA, we've been talking about that for years of how do we help this, advocate for this at the state level and say, here's our role, here's what we're doing. And, you know, we've had the conversation about approaching WDE, about adopting the mindsets and behaviors just for our standards, because we don't have standards we follow. In my district, we use the mindsets and behaviors. That's what we've started to build our entire programs around, but not every district is that way. Other states around us have done that. Even in just the way we're evaluated, our evaluations. I know a lot of districts that use a teacher evaluation, but they tweak it to make it match what a school counselor does when it really doesn't match it. Other states around us have adopted a universal school counselor evaluation. And so little things like that, I think not only and how we advocate, National School Counseling Week, I noted in February, is a great way to advocate for our role, and ask to develop that, not so people could say to us how wonderful we are. It's our week to be recognized. No, it's our week to say, this is what I do. And I think we make that impact in little ways of presenting to our administration, hey, here's some data about who I've seen, what kinds of things I've worked on, how many lessons I've done, those kinds of things. Maybe not specifics of students I've seen, but numbers, you know, just sharing the data to show here's the impact I'm making and advocating for ourselves in that way. And I know WISCA, we've talked about that as a board for as long as I've been on the board. And I've been on the board, I don't know what, Suzanne, a year less than you. I don't know, what is it now, 7 years, 6 years? 6 years, this is my 6th year on the board.
A while.
A while. That's been the conversation we've had for as long as I can remember, is that advocacy piece, because we are passionate about that and making sure that our role is recognized and we're referred to as we deserve, you know, without a territorial war or without confusion. And I think ASCA would say it's on us to make sure we educate what our role is and don't just expect people to understand. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Sherry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think another thing with advocacy, and as the board, we've talked about getting people onto a committee to work with advocacy. So for those of you that are on the call today, if you know, you enjoy approaching the state and legislation and all those types of things, which is not in my wheelhouse, but if that's something you enjoy, please send me an email and we'd like to get you added to that committee to start making some forward progress with that. So just go ahead and send that to amason@fremont24.com. And as we move forward with that advocacy committee, we'll get you on there.
I'm just still baffled, Sherry, about why they have to split it. Why can't the school counselor just do what they do, or the school social worker do what they do? Why do they have to like legitimately like split that title? I guess
I think it's a funding issue, Suzanne. So the school counseling side comes out of general funds, and then the school social worker comes out of special education funds. And so I think that's why the job title is like split like that. Sorry.
I'll just say it goes back to that job description, I guess. Like if that is technically in the job description and that's the only way they can pay them, I guess that makes sense. So
yeah, I think what I would love to see is instead of saying school counselor, school social worker, let's let the official district job title be mental health professional, and then within that say this can be a certified school counselor, certified school social worker, licensed counselor, licensed clinical social worker, and then not split the title so that it's not so confusing to other people that we're working with, that it's the same stuff, it's different degrees.
Hi, I'm in Green River. Social worker to be funded by special education. I'm funded by special education as a school counselor, but I'm also counselor. I also had my LPC from Nebraska and never transferred it. But the funding doesn't mean the label. For some reason, they just don't understand the difference between the training of a counselor and a social worker. And the counselor typically has more psychological background than the school social worker does. So I think showing those differences in training is important. And I know our special services director does not know the difference between a counselor, a social worker, or a therapist.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some comments in the chat now that I've opened it, that's talking about the problem with calling a licensed clinical social worker a counselor, or calling a licensed professional counselor a social worker. And that's exactly where I've been sitting this year, as a licensed professional counselor, because our state statute says those are protected titles. And so you don't call yourself something that you are not licensed for. So that's why I worked with our school district, and now I've got the okay when I'm doing paperwork for the IEP, or I'm in an IEP meeting. I'm very clear that I am a counselor, and what I'm doing is counseling. It's not social work.
Hey guys, oh, sorry. One last person, and then we're gonna need to transition to the rest of our agenda.
All right. I just wanted to say that I'm RJ May from Bighorn One, and I just, the reason the way that we kept a counselor in every building in our district was to fund half of our funding through special ed, and then half of our funding through regular ed. And so I don't understand why they had to stipulate that it was a social worker, but that's just what we had to do in our district so that we could keep them, because we're small. And so I think that helps schools more than anything, just to keep counselors in their buildings. So, especially in Wyoming.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that was the beginning of the dual role, even in Natrona County, and we're larger. But in order to get school counselors into every building, that was kind of the middle meeting point, was to say, well, they're half-time, their job is the school counseling role as defined by Natrona County School District as gen ed, and then the other half their school social worker to work with students on IEPs. Well, I appreciate the time to talk about this, and I look forward to being able to continue our conversation statewide on a number of topics.
Yeah, and I'd like, this is Missy Knack from Natrona County High School, and you know, I've lived the life of this, because I was part of a small group hired under a grant in Natrona County, and we all started in 2001. So it's been an ongoing, it's just been an ongoing conversation in our district for a long, long time. And part of it was to be able to continue services to students once that grant ran out. So with that said, why I chose to get on, I found myself in the world of politics. I am not a politician, I learned very quickly. And there's a lot of things I don't understand about politics, but I do want to just let the group know that we really, if we want things to happen, we have to, the words of wisdom I got from a politician at the time was that we have to approach this through WISCA. And we have to approach it with a team and a committee. And I was working with somebody from Gillette at one point, and I'll be honest, I ended up getting a divorce in the throes of all of that, and I couldn't move on with it. But I am not interested in being a politician, and but we do have to approach it that way. Sorry, I didn't mean to ramble on so long.
Thank you guys for sharing. We definitely appreciate it. And just remember, guys, for topics for the upcoming meetings, just you can email me. You know, Sherry put this on her survey, so we pulled from that. Our next topic came from an email, so I'd like to introduce Lucas Grant. He's served on our board before, and he's currently in Park County in Cody. So I'd like to introduce him, and then he's going to visit a little bit about the Jason Flat Act amendment.
Thank you. So I'm going to check here real quick. So I know Mr. Kasabun has said that he was going to try to make it today. I'm not sure if he is here right now, but he's the school psychologist here in Cody at the high school, and he's an amazing school psychologist, and he's been doing a lot of hard work on this Jason Flat Act amendment. And I know there's others from Cody that are here as well, and feel free to jump in and help me explain it if I'm not doing such a good job. But first I'd like to check and see, I didn't see his name, but I'm going to pause for a second and see if Mr. Kasabun's here. Okay, so he introduced this to us the other day. He's been working on, let's see. So the Jason Flat Act, it mandates suicide prevention training for, it currently for administrators and teachers. And so the amendment would be to include students as well. He's done some research on this. And part of the reason why they want to do this is because students are the ones who know when their peers are struggling with thoughts of suicide. And so getting them some training goes a step beyond what we have already. He's been in touch with Senator Northrup, has support there. One of the reasons he has such great support is because this does not put any additional cost on the schools, because the counties already have money set aside for this. And so the money's there. It would just make an amendment so that students grades 6 through 12 are included in that Jason Flat Act is mandating them to have suicide prevention training. I know right now it's still in the works. It's still not finished, but he was wondering if Wyoming School Counselor Association and the members of it would be interested in showing their support for this act. And I'd like to also ask the other counselors from from Cody, if you'd like to add any additional comments to that.
Lucas, I think you addressed that really well. I can't think of anything to add. It was the amendment would add the students 612, and like you said, no additional cost because the counties already have that money set aside.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns? And we can definitely pass those along through Lucas and get some answers for you. I know one thing that when they emailed us, one question we had is just, do we have the details yet? Do we have the requirements? And that's what they're still working on, correct, Lucas?
Yes, they're still working on those requirements and everything that they're putting inside of it. Right now, they're just kind of looking for a soft commit to see if we have some interest in helping out. I know he's already talked to other professional agencies throughout the state and has some support from them right now. He says it has a good chance of passing, but they still have some work to do on it. So, yeah.
This is Tim Jones from Rocky Mountain High School. I was just wondering, does the Jason Flatt Act include training paraprofessionals or just administrators and certified staff?
This is, sorry, this is Wendy from Albany County. I've used the Jason Flatt Foundation training materials to do all staff suicide prevention training. And there's a lot of material and you kind of need to go through and pick and choose to decide how you want to fill your required hours. And I've had paraprofessionals in those training seminars and it's gone really well.
And I'm not sure what's required of it. I do know, I'm looking at Wendy's comment saying, will they have materials for kids? It will be up to the districts to find what they want to use for their kids, but it does need to be, I forgot the word for it. It's a
Evidence-based,
yes,
right?
yes, exactly. It needs to be evidence-based.
Any other questions that we can try to answer or take to Daniel for further clarification?
This is Wendy, and while I think it's really good that we do 6 through 12, I've also done suicide prevention lessons at elementary level, mostly for 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, and I think it's not. I think it's appropriate that we do a little bit at that level too, because we've had elementary school kids take their own lives.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I'm at the high school right now, I did do suicide prevention in the elementary school, and there are ways of talking about it. Yeah, because it's very imperative to start then.
I would like to maybe just propose that we do a soft commit. Kelly had, Kelly's on, she's taking notes for us, but she had said she would draft a letter that we could maybe, put out there in one of our future meetings for everyone to look at. Once we get more details, then we could, have further conversation. But does anyone have any concerns with a soft commit pending looking at the final draft of what they're going to propose? All right, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you, Lucas. Lastly, just kind of some follow-up. Molly, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Molly, if you guys were on last week, she works at Connections Academy and they had a meeting concerning virtual graduation. So she was going to quickly just update us on that meeting and some ideas for us.
Yeah, I think I got some good stuff out of the meeting, and as I explained before, we're a public school, but there's a private section of the school that we're really closely related to, and they're international, and so they've been doing online graduations for several years because it's just impossible for them to get all their students together, and so we're kind of looking towards that this year, just because we're not sure we're going to be able to get everybody together from across the state, and I was thinking, I know. For brick and mortar schools who have all of your students are from one community, you may be looking at different options specifically for graduation, like pushing it back or something like that. But I also was thinking that this would work well for any of those senior nights and those end of the year nights that we typically have through May, like National Honor Society or the FFA awards or the sports awards minus the spring sports. But any of those award nights, you could also potentially, especially for the seniors, do those virtually. One of the things that they say they always do that I had never even dawned on me was that they record a big portion of the ceremony prior and they put it together. They use a program called Camtasia, which is not free. You have to purchase it, but it's $169 for an educator license. And then you can put together like a presentation. So they have people record, they have the teachers record what they're going to say, the principal records it. They have the students create slides, and then they put all of that together using that Camtasia. And so the actual graduation ceremony part of it is recorded, but they do it in like a Zoom room. So the chat is live, and so people can have it, it's presented as a synchronous event. So it's not like a recorded event. So all the students are in there, and they say that they get a lot of people are kind of excited because they could even have like their aunt who lives in North Carolina who wouldn't ever be able to make it for graduation can come in, and they can write in the chat, and they can do all of their celebrations and stuff that way while it's going on. They said that really what you got to kind of just think of what are the most important traditional aspects and figure out how you can modify them of a graduation. I'm just trying to highlight some of the important things. The slideshow, which they use, they have the seniors submit, they send outside templates. One is a formal template and one is more of a fun template. And so they do the senior slideshow, they play it at the beginning and at the end. And then they use that formal one for the actual ceremony when they're saying the names. And so they have the school counselors kind of go through, do a recording where they say the name and they show the picture. So that's kind of like the virtual walk across the stage. And so I'm trying to think what else. I mean, besides that, it's kind of just like sitting down and brainstorming and like, what does our ceremony really look like? What are the parts of it that we think are important and we want to try to transition to virtual? How can we do those well? What are some things we might be able to even add in that we can't do in person that might work better virtually? And so that's kind of the overview of it. But to me, that idea of like recording a section of it previously was something that I had never even thought of, and is probably the direction we'll go. And it just gives it more of a polished kind of professional look. You can do it that way. And that way, if you have your valedictorian speech recorded, then you can be sure that they're not going to be a lag, that the internet's not going to be choppy or any of that stuff. And so I guess I would just say if anybody is interested in, yes, please do, in more information, we can definitely get together. I have like, they send a lot of links to like documents they use. They send out an official graduation announcement for it. They also have a program that they do that they send out electronically. They can send it out by mail so that it's like, a lot of parents want to keep the program from graduation. So you can still do that, those kinds of things. So I'd be happy to share that with anybody, everybody. We can meet one-on-one. I can show you, I can share my screen, however, in any way that we can possibly help. Happy to do it. Oh, it's called Camtasia. I'll type it into the chat if I can do that. Here we go. And I think the regular price is $249, but you can click on a little button right underneath it that says educator pricing, and it's $169. It says one-time fee, so I think that's like forever. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll type down.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly, for updating us on that and sharing that. I know that's definitely something that our district has been asking. How are we going to do those other events, even if we postpone graduation or whatnot? So I sure appreciate that. The uses can be endless there. So. One other resource that we had come across our way is the youuplift.com, and it's a platform for submitting positive or uplifting messages to one another or to staff, just kind of sharing that positivity. I do like that this one also allows for an approval button. So whoever you set up within your school or your district, it can really help monitor the messages are truly uplifting and an option for kind of helping kids through this rough time and seeing the positives. So we wanted to share that with you. Just a little side resource if you're looking for creative ways to kind of foster some of that togetherness from afar. Okay, so with the last few minutes here, if there's anything else, questions or comments, maybe celebrations, something that went well this week, I think that's really helpful to hear across our members and let us know what's going on. So I'm going to just pause for a minute and ask that you join us and have any other questions or comments or celebrations, let us know.
I'm kind of wondering about what people think about the governor's message yesterday and possibly allowing some of our most at-risk kids back in school with contact with teachers.
We have online PLC meetings, so I'm in all of the grade level PLC meetings as a way to keep in contact with all the teachers and aides that way. So I have all grade levels every week, and that helps me also identify any students that are struggling that might need some extra support that are not on my counseling rolls. So I've been doing mostly Google Classroom videos, recording myself, all those kinds of things for the kids and so on. So, and I have set up Zoom meeting times that anybody can pop in and pop out at any time every day. So it's kept me in contact. I'm also the president of our education association, so I've been in contact with our HR and our superintendent to start looking at a task force to look what it would look like to reopen, what kinds of things we might be doing.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Any other items that we want to talk about? Celebrations, small victories. Smallest of victories in my world, our master schedule somehow got created from a distance. I don't know how we did it, but I have to have a little celebration over here because that was a new adventure.
That's a major celebration, not a minor one.
All right, Amy, is there anything else that we wanted to make sure that we talked about before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Like I said at the beginning, we're going to transition it to other board members leading the meetings. And then I've had a few people, like last week we had job openings that were posted. I had another one that was added today, so I just put it right on the agenda. And like April said in the chats, if you want to send it our way, we can also get it posted on our Facebook page. So if you want to send me those links to the job openings, I can get those on our Facebook page. So.
Awesome. So yeah, I think the board members or a couple of us will stick around here for a few minutes if you have questions for us. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining again this lovely Friday. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.